So this final panel will review engineering around autonomous AI agents for next-level customer experiences. Please join me in welcoming Sean from Rocket Companies, Shailesh from Sendbird, Thies from Cognigy, and Joanne from Foundation Capital.
Well, I'm super excited to be here because we're going to talk about the future, which is how are we engineering autonomous AI agents. Super excited to have Sean, Shailesh, and Theis here, who are going to talk about what they're actually building in their organizations. We'll discuss some of the challenges with building these agents. How do we measure performance, and also what's to come in the future. First, I'll ask each of you guys to maybe introduce yourselves and give a bit of background on what you're working on. Maybe starting with you, Sean.
Sure, so thank you. So I'm Sean Malhotra, I'm the CTO for Rocket Companies. At Rocket, our mission, we like to say, is to help everyone home. We do that by facilitating home search, getting your mortgage, getting your title, servicing your mortgage, so the whole home ownership journey. And as you can imagine, AI agents are pretty helpful through many of that process, whether it's our agent-based chat to help you answer questions about listings or questions about mortgage products, or on the back end, using agents to help with mortgage underwriting. There's a lot of manual steps, a lot of document processing, so it's a great fit for it. So we're very excited about where the technology has gone.
Awesome, can't wait to hear more.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shailesh Nalawadi, Head of Product for Sendbird. Sendbird actually builds AI agentic experiences for customer service use cases on behalf of customers in a couple of different verticals, including on-demand and food delivery, retail, financial services, healthcare, and travel. And we've been on, the company is actually 10 years old, and for most of its time, we were a developer API company that allowed apps like DoorDash and Hinge to create conversational experiences. And it's only been in the last 2 years that we've taken that to the next step and actually started bringing agentic experiences to really bring conversational AI into much more of a forefront.
And Theis?
All right. Yeah, hey everyone. My name is Theis Waanders. I'm a Senior Vice President of AI Transformation at Cognigy. Similar to Sendbird in the sense that we are all about customer service and customer experience automation. We have an amazing platform in which you can build AI agents that can really integrate with contact centers in particular. We see that in the enterprise space. Larger contact center deployments typically run on partially on-prem software, right? So it's a different approach. Not everything is super modern per se in terms of ecosystem, and that's where we really excel, like fitting in there, very flexible deployment, and automating customer experience at scale.
Great. Well, we have folks who have a lot of perspective, both inside their companies as well as working with clients. So this is going to be a great conversation. Maybe we can start off with, how do we think about success? What's like the ROI of these agents? And for us, we're early stage investors investing in a lot of agentic AI companies. And that's usually one of the questions, like, is this a cost elimination? Is this a revenue generation? And how do you even think about it? So perhaps we can start the conversation there. Maybe we'll start with Theis today.
Sure, yeah. I guess that, from a customer service point of view, it's pretty straightforward, right? You have your cost per call, your cost per interaction. If you can use AI agents to automate parts of those calls, you can reduce the average handling time of a call. You could maybe fully automate a call, right? And therefore increase the containment rate. So those are very common KPIs that we see. If you, however, look at the potential of AI agents in customer experience, you look at revenue generation use cases, abandoned shopping baskets, outbound calling, following up with people, right? Those KPIs are they're different, right? They're more about revenue generation, CSAT, converting customers, conversion rates. And that's what we're seeing. It's like shifting from pure customer service to a much broader approach, a more holistic approach where you have the entire customer journey, including the post-sales, the follow-ups, keeping in touch and building out that relationship. Yeah.
Makes sense. How about you, Sean, at Rocket?
Yes, look, I'd echo that. I think that these are really powerful tools. They can help you on both sides, whether it's revenue generation or containing expense. To touch on something that Theis just said, conversion matters a lot to us, and we found that with our agent-based experience, the conversational experience on the website, clients are 3 times more likely to convert when they come through that channel, right? So they're having a good experience, they're getting the questions they need answered, and therefore converting at higher rates. But we also see, just the other day we had an engineer in about 2 days of work was able to build a simple agent to handle a very niche problem called transfer tax calculations in the mortgage underwriting part of the process. And that 2 days of effort saved us $1 million a year in expense. And so we see a whole bunch of, last year, I think the stat that we have is in 2024, we saved over 1 million team member hours, mostly off the back of our AI solutions. So that's not just saving expense, it's also allowing our team members to focus their time on people making what is often the largest financial transaction of their life. And so they do a better job at that.
Makes sense. And how about you, Shailesh?
Yeah, and I am going to echo largely what has already been said, which is the initial attraction of any of these deployments for AI agents tends to be around saving human capital. And the math is pretty straightforward. However, I think that undersells the transformational capability that you get with AI agents. Thijs mentioned something in passing, which is outbound calling. Our version of that is we call it proactive customer service, which is the ability to detect that you have a problem and actually reach out and have then AI agent initiate the conversation saying, hey, we noticed that your food order is running late. We're aware of it, and we're here to maybe handle any remediation if required. Those kinds of experiences were not possible under kind of the old way of thinking about customer success. So definitely short-term costs, but long-term, the revenue potential from AI agent experiences.
This brings me to a question which a lot of our customers or our portfolio companies' customers are asking, which is, you guys are saving a lot of money, right? You mentioned $1 million in human capital. So then how do you think about perhaps the relationship between the human workers in a company and these agents? Is there, actually cost cutting that's happening?
Yeah, look, I think for us, the way we think about it is we're supercharging our team members, right? So that 1 million hours saved isn't the entirety of someone's job, replicated many times. It's fractions of the job that, frankly, are the things they didn't want to do and that weren't adding value to the client. So that 1 million hours saved is basically giving us capacity to handle more business. So I think, the stat that we had was that it was some of our team members were able to handle 50% more clients last year than they were the year before. So it means we can have higher throughput, drive more business. And then again, we see higher conversion rates because they're spending the time understanding deeply the client need versus doing a lot of the more rote work that the AI can do now.
Makes sense. Let's talk about engineering for a moment, right? These are complicated architectures, new infrastructures that we're all adopting. What are some of the biggest challenges for you guys when you're building these agents? And how do you think about the technologies that are available today and what might be here tomorrow, since some of this is changing so quickly? Perhaps we'll start with Shailesh this time.
Yeah, I'll say that the most interesting thing that I've come to realize in actually using large language models as part of an application is that it's different from how, first of all, it's different from how search works, and it's different from how a lot of us today are using ChatGPT, which is you ask a question and you get a response, right? And maybe you ask a follow-up question, you get a response. But in the process of constructing an AI agent response to a customer query, it's actually not even one call that goes out to a large language model. It's actually multiple calls that go out, and they are pipelined together in a sequence. And that complexity is something that it wasn't apparent, and actually it increases over time as you realize, like, oh, I forgot, like I should have this thing done before I have a response. Maybe I should apply a guardrail, and that's another call to a large language model. So what we've seen is a typical response from an AI agent actually involves something like 7 to 10 calls to a large language model. And often these are different large language models optimized for different purposes. So that's been very interesting to learn. And actually, I suspect as we get more experience, it will actually get larger. The number of calls will get larger. The number of specialized large language models used to construct a response is actually going to increase over time.
Actually, I had a follow-up question, and we'll ask Thijs this question as well. Did you train people internally to solve some of this, or was there kind of different hiring protocols that you guys thought about?
So this is something that we've actually discovered through to trial and error, right? And so part of the journey for our engineering team is moving from the mindset of software engineering, write once, and test it, and it runs and gives the same answer 1,000 times, to the more probabilistic approach, which is you ask the same thing to a large language model, and it gives different answers through some probability. That requires a mind shift change, and honestly, there isn't anyone that has that thinking already. So a lot of it has been kind of bringing people along, not just software engineers, but product managers, UX designers. Everyone has to think slightly differently, given the probabilistic nature of large language models.
How about for you, Thijs? What were some of the maybe biggest challenges, and how are you guys thinking about the architecture of all this?
Yeah, I mean, what Shailesh, what you mentioned totally resonates. Like we've really had to go through a lot of trial and error. I will say that what really helped is that the LLMs have come a long way, right? If we would build something, let's say 1.5, 2 years ago, you'd really have to pick the right model, right? You'd pick a different model, and it would not perform the way you would expect it to perform. We're now in a stage where most of the mainstream models behave really well, and they're more predictable, right? So, but nonetheless, to your point, like you need to combine models, right? And then there's the latency challenge. If you do voice automation, right? Like you need to be super responsive. People don't want to wait, 3 to 5 seconds for an answer. So that's all about orchestrating the right models in the right sequence, weaving in the right data. And that's been a huge challenge, honestly, because we have customers that push tens of millions of conversations per year, right? So if you automate, let's say, 30 million conversations per year, how does that scale in the LLM world, right? That's all stuff that we had to discover. Simple stuff from even getting the model availability with the cloud providers, like having enough quota with a ChatGPT model, for example. Those are all learnings that we had to go through, and our customers as well, right? Because it's a brand new world in that regard.
We'll love to hear from you, Sean, about your experience.
Yeah, look, I think some of the same things that have been mentioned here. The one I'll add is kind of a layer above orchestrating the LLM calls is orchestrating a network of agents. And so when you come to our site, go to the conversational experience, under the hood, there's a network of agents. And so the orchestrator is deciding which agent do I farm the request out to. And I think many are at the stage right now where we have a handful of agents assisting you with what you need. But if you play that forward and think about having hundreds or thousands of agents who are capable of different things, that challenge of how do I decide who to delegate to? Do I delegate to multiple of them? Do they all kind of have to vote for which problem they can solve? I think you get some really interesting technical problems to solve. So it's becoming a bigger problem because latency and time matters. But I think that agent routing, I think, is going to be a very interesting problem to solve over the coming years.
And we're seeing this in some of our companies too. So, for example, we were seed investors in a company called Jasper, which was, one of the first kind of, LLM-based AI marketing companies. Jasper had to build all of the infrastructure, right, for model selection and routing and testing, et cetera, because there was nothing available from a vendor standpoint. But today, I think there's multiple options to help companies do this. We have a company called Arise, which is effectively in the AI ops space, which is trying to do pieces of this from evaluation, to routing, to monitoring, et cetera. I'm curious, how do you guys think about building this infrastructure in-house as things get more complex versus working with vendors? And if you are working with vendors, how do you select these vendors?
Yeah, look, I think from my perspective, our development resources, our product design team, they're the most valuable resources we have. And so part of my role is to make sure that we're deploying them on where we aim to differentiate and create value. Right? How do we help people home? How do we kind of really further that mission? And it's not in building generic LLM infrastructure or AI infrastructure. So we absolutely want to partner with vendors. And when we look at selection, in my seat, what I care most about is not just the initial build, but the ability to debug and iterate and improve on what's been built, right? It's usually the maintenance cost that kills you, not the V1. So we try to look for partners who help us really maintain the software and grow it and improve it. And look, we're trying to move fast, and so there's times where we have had to build infrastructure ourselves because it didn't exist. But I want to quickly follow and swap that out for a vendor once it's available because I don't want to maintain that infrastructure.
Makes sense.
So Sendbird is often the vendor in these relationships, and we are going out and meeting companies. Interestingly, Redfin, which is now a Rocket portfolio company, was a customer of ours, or is a customer of ours, and often we find the most successful conversation that we have with prospective customers tends to be someone who's already built something in-house, to your point, quickly realized that getting to a 1.0 was okay, but then as the world evolves and as the infrastructure evolves and as they need to swap out technology for something that's new, they don't have the ability to kind of orchestrate all of these things. And so one of our many of our conversations involve, do you have an eval infrastructure? Can we build one for you? Have you thought about what happens when a model changes and there's a new version? How are you going to go back and test all of your existing workflows? Well, we've thought about it because we've been a vendor, and that's some of the value that we give. And so that's an area that I think increasingly folks that have built in-house are starting to realize that they would benefit from a perspective of a vendor.
Is there one or two customers that you can share that are kind of maybe the most successful working with you?
Many of them are just now getting started in terms of their production deployment, but we have a couple of companies in South Korea that really push the boundaries. There's a furniture company that has been evaluating us in terms of asking customers asking questions about delivery and as well refunds and exchanges. We also have many customers in on-demand and food delivery that's been part of Sendbird's core vertical that are now experimenting with agentic experiences. Because you can imagine, the most common customer service inquiry in food delivery is, "Where's my food?" And that's something that's actually eminently solvable with AI agents. So we've seen successes in those initial success in those verticals.
Thais, we'd love to hear from your experience.
Yeah, it's very similar again, right? So we're not as big into food vertical, but retail is huge for us, right? Wismo, where's my order? It's a very common one. We work with the top sports brands in the world, for example, right? And they have millions of requests, just people asking where their orders are. What we see with customers, airline being another vertical, very high volumes, repetitive questions, of course, is that they're often starting with a hybrid, right? So they might have they might have bots in place, they might have knowledge bases, right? They have their CRM, so some basic foundation is in place. And then they want to add agentic AI on top of that to help solve problems better, but not for everything, right? If you have a refund process, maybe you want to have a stricter workflow that guides you through a refund process or a complaints process. So what we really see is that agentic AI is booming. Everyone is switching to it, including our customer base, right? We have an amazing platform for it, so the technology is there. It's very much a matter of mapping the right use cases to the right technology right now. Again, especially in an enterprise setting with very high volume, because I'll add, like, the cost aspect is also something to, I mean, you mentioned 10 API calls for one user input, right? It's maybe not always the case if you do voice, but nonetheless, like, these things, they do add up. Yeah.
Are you guys seeing that this is a board level priority for some of your customers, that you must adopt agentic technology or die? I mean, we're seeing this across, I mean, even Salesforce, they change everything to Agentforce, for example, because the system of records are in possibly a lot of trouble, right, as some of these new architectures are coming out. So curious, what's like the priority level for some of the customers you're working with?
So I can take that. So yes, absolutely, it's a board level priority for some obvious reasons, which is, hey, this is transformational. There's everyone's seeing a big win in terms of gross margin, but also I think there's the underlying thing is that you need to start playing with this technology and getting comfortable. It's okay if your first few implementations don't turn out to be quite as good, but you're going to learn from the experience. You're going to learn from talking to vendors. And if you don't do that, you're going to fall behind much more rapidly. So it's really about, like, it is a board priority, often driven by financials, but it's really also about the experience and having the organization gain the experience in operating with large language models.
I want to come back to something that Sean said earlier, which is today the agents are relatively simple, right? They're doing usually one task. Maybe it's a complex workflow, and perhaps each company is adopting a handful of them, right? And usually these agents are somewhat independent in their work. Now, if you fast forward, in what's theoretically possible, you mentioned that there could be hundreds of them in an organization, and perhaps they are learning from each other. They're taking data from each other and feeding it back to each other to learn new things. And in that world, the number of things that could happen just explodes, right? The complexity explodes. How do you think about that future, and what are you guys doing today to kind of solve for that?
You know, it's interesting. I think that a lot of the early fears, questions with AI exist with every technology, right? If you look at even the term AI agent has a loose definition in terms of how you define it. But I think what's happening is it just means that the checks and balances you have in your system will get stressed more. So you just have to do the things you've always been doing, which is make sure that for something that's like a regulatory process, that you have a human in the loop to make sure that someone is signing off on this and making sure that it's still okay. For critical internal processes or data access, for instance, do you have observability? Do you have the right alerting and monitoring so that if something goes wrong, you know that it's going wrong? But I think trying to not lean into it and trying to basically say, I'll avoid the problem by having less stuff happening feels like a losing strategy. So I think it's just really doubling down on your detection, understanding where you need human in the loop, and then trusting that those processes are going to catch if something does go wrong. But just the power it unlocks, you have to do it.
And how about you guys for the next 18 to 24 months, Shailesh and Thais? How do you plan perhaps your product roadmap? Or is that primarily driven by the customers?
In our case, it's a half and half. A lot of it is driven by customers coming to us with innovative use cases and saying, "Is this even possible?" And that's an interesting conversation because it helps us kind of work with them to build out experiences. I previously mentioned the concept of proactive customer service, reaching out before they realize that they have a problem. That came about from a conversation with our customers in food delivery. They already know when an order is going to be late. And rather than waiting for the customer to get upset and call them, they realized that there was an opportunity to get ahead of it. So that, I think, is the exciting part, is that once the cost conversation is completed and out of the way, is now you get to the really fun part, which is the things that you could not possibly do that you can now do because you have an agentic infrastructure in place. So a lot of it is really customer conversations as far as future-looking stuff.
What is maybe the most demanding out of the requests that you're seeing from customers?
For us, I think it's the how can I have confidence that this is not going to give the wrong answer, and how am I confident that this is not going to give the wrong answer as I continue to evolve the infrastructure, add in a new LLM, add in a new stage, right? So that part is actually really difficult, if you haven't thought about it in the beginning. And the short answer is, before you even start building it, is you should have an eval infrastructure in place, right? I think we've talking about it here. It has come up in previous conversations as well. Before you start, make sure you have a rigorous environment in which you know what good looks like from an AI agent, and that you have this test set, and then you keep referring back to it as you make improvements. I mean, all of us used to be software engineers. No one deploys to production without running unit tests. And I think a very simplistic way of thinking about eval is that it's the unit test for your agentic system.
Awesome. Thais, any thoughts?
Yeah, we have we do a lot of red teaming, right? We also work with partners to do that. And we have a feature that we're releasing soon that is about simulating potential conversations, right? So it's essentially AI agents testing AI agents. Now, especially in the customer experience space, it's all about customer demographics, right? How does the AI agent react to someone that is annoyed, has very little time, right? How does it react to a very young person that uses slang maybe, right? How does it react to different languages? So simulating those conversations at scale in the platform, that's a huge thing that a lot of our customers are asking for, because the problem is it's not deterministic, so you don't really know what you don't know, right? And I mean, unit testing, super important, but the biggest challenge is you don't know what you don't know. Like, how does it react to anything that anyone could come up with? It will react. These are completion models, right? They're amazing. And the trick is making sure that they don't react in a way that we don't want them to react. And so that's you can only find it out by simulating conversations, by really pushing it under thousands of different scenarios, and then analyze how it holds and how they react. Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. We're seeing definitely a lot of observability demands, right? And a lot of new approaches, everything from labs at Stanford and thinking about different approaches to a lot more pressure in observability companies to just shed more light in terms of what's actually going on. Maybe we'll end this with one last question from everybody. Curious, what is your biggest prediction of how this is going to evolve? And maybe we'll start with Sean.
Look, I think predictions in this space are tough because you're proven wrong a month later, which is what's so fun about it. But I think there's been a lot of talk about MCP and protocols like A2A for agents to communicate with one another. The thing that really excites me is whether you're running a large organization or whether you're trying to work between organizations, the problem of discovery is real. Right? So one of the problems I have to face is trying to make sure that if one part of my team builds something really valuable, does everyone else know about it, and will they reuse that API, that endpoint that's just been created? And so you can try API catalogs and ways of solving this, but what I love is if you play forward what MCP and what some of these things will evolve to, and you look at like the sampling part of the protocol, this world where I built something cool, and an agent that understands its goal and what it's trying to solve realizes that tool can help me solve my problem. So like automating the discovery and utilization of a new tool, to me, is just like it's the API economy just 10x. And that's really exciting to me because that is where just the exchange of value and the pace of innovation is going to hit a whole new level.
Makes a lot of sense. How about you, Shailesh?
I mean, it's humbling, this industry and the pace at which it moves. And so I feel very circumspect about making predictions. So I'm going to restrict myself to something that I see is more likely to happen in the next 3 to 12 months, which I think is voice. Right? Voice is a lagging modality in terms of interactions with large language models, but very much something that's a big win in customer experience. And so you're going to see increasingly, you will see in your day-to-day life, many more of these voice-related conversational experiences rolling out. Lots of our customers are experimenting with it, and some of those experiments are now going to turn into experiences that you will see and experience yourself. So that's coming very, very soon.
Yeah, agreed. Maybe a different insight. Wouldn't call it a prediction. I do see that there's almost like a battle of orchestration going on, right? So to Sean's point, you will not have 10 or 100, you have thousands of these agents working together through MCP, A2A, right? Someone needs to keep an eye on that and orchestrate all of that. And so the question we get a lot from our customers is, do I put everything in one big ecosystem? You have the obvious vendors there, right? Or should I go for more of a best-of-breed approach? My prediction is you have to go for a best-of-breed approach simply because all of the tools, everything your company does from an IT point of view will at some point have an AI agent element to it, right? And it's almost impossible to put that in one ecosystem. So orchestrating all of that and being clever about how you orchestrate that and get value from that, I think that's going to be super important in the coming period.
Awesome. And I'll just end with one thought, which is we're seeing over the last couple years, companies sell outcomes for the first time, right? Selling work, selling outcomes, the way that humans are selling themselves as employees. And that's driven a ton of velocity. So for example, one of my companies, Tenor, which is doing healthcare back office automation, went from pre-revenues, no customers 2 years ago at the seed stage to raising a Series C just a couple of days ago at 600 million post, and that is kind of unprecedented without this technology. I suspect we're going to see a shift in paradigm, going from humans prompting machines to machines prompting humans, and that's going to play out probably sooner than we think. So thank you guys so much for being here. Really enjoyed the conversation, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.